Hey everyone, welcome to the 10x Your Success Story online summit where 30 experts will share their skills, secrets, and shortcuts to help you achieve your most ambitious dreams. My name is Jeric and I am your host. Our guest is the founder of multiple companies such as Valence Enterprises and Cognity Labs, co-founder of Idea Space, the Philippines' first startup accelerators, and QBO, the National Innovation Center of the country. And he is the author of the up-and-coming book Startup Mindsets, which will launch at the end of the year. Let us welcome Earl Valencia. Hi, Earl.
Hi, how are you doing? No,
I'm
thanks
doing
for.
great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of patching in here from San Francisco in California. Although I'm from the Philippines and my heart obviously is in the Philippines, right?
Yeah,
So I'm excited to be here. I think talking about the secrets to success and talking about at the end of the day, like what is really the how do you kind of come back from adversity? I think
yeah,
is a really good topic for all of us to discuss right now.
yeah. And thank you for spending the time with us to, share your skills and your knowledge, especially that, and your experiences too. So, Earl, you said that what helped you achieve the level of your success right now is helping companies grow from idea to becoming real businesses, right? How did you get started in this kind of venture, and how did this help you achieve your success right now?
Yeah, I never thought that was kind of my niche, right? Because when I was young, one thing I loved to do was to build, right? To build things, to think about ideas, and then to
Mm.
make things nothing. So, I mean, even when I was young, just selling, like example, like I tried to sell like cookies, right?
Yeah.
In like a bazaar, or I just tried to sell T-shirts, or tried to sell things, right? Um, that just caught me kind of really early on, or maybe when I had basketball cards when I was young and trading them and selling them actually. So I just didn't like open up packs, but I always thought as like if I had to buy basketball cards, it's like an investment, right? Because if I can get a good card, I can potentially trade it or sell it. I think that mindset kind of landed me in a kind of a good way on what really is business and how to kind of start a business, right? And then when I went to pick like a major in school, I had a choice, right? Business, others, but then engineering really appealed to me, and it's really when I realized that being an engineer, you can create something out of nothing. Obviously, you can build products, technologies, etc. But then ended up kind of going through both the technology and the business route eventually, and I realized that I like building things, program systems in general, and that's in essence maybe a startup company, especially in technology, right? And I was fortunate enough to just see things through in multiple areas, right? So building kind of products from nothing, um, seeing and building programs that scaled through, all across the globe when I was in Cisco. And then ultimately, when I went to the Philippines, like I started Idea Space, which for people don't know, it's one of the leading kind of startup programs in the Philippines right now. We've supported about 70 kind of companies directly, and then maybe thousands of companies indirectly by just helping, mentoring, inspiring, doing hundreds of programs per year. And that all started with a pitch deck to my former boss and chairman, Manny Pangilinan. And then he funded me with, 10 or $12 billion to start this idea, right? So but that literally started with the PowerPoint deck. And then I saw that coming from a PowerPoint deck all the way up to ended up birthing QBO, which is kind of one of the national programs of the Philippines for innovation. So literally from an idea
Yeah.
all the way up to something that impacts the entire country in 4 years, right? And I think that's something that I just love doing, and I still continue to do right now.
That's actually awesome because, being an entrepreneur is really, something that's close to my heart. And thinking about it, it's about, creating something out of nothing, right? Just an idea, and then you get to create a product, a company, and then help people, and so on and so forth. So, with that said, Earl, can you give us some like tips on um, how can we develop our ideas and turn them into something of a business?
Yeah, and I think that's something to really reflect on, right? Because starting a business is, to be honest, like it's very difficult. Like I don't think what I call is, it's not for the faint of heart or even faint of spirit. Um, but you want to do something not just for financial return. Obviously, hopefully it goes to financial return, but you build a business of some problem that you really want to solve for yourself and for maybe your community or for your country, right? Like it doesn't matter, or maybe just in general, right? So you have to think about like what really is this problem that's very important to you to pursue, right? And I call it like, obviously you have the vision or the North Star, but then the mission, which is close to your heart, right? So even in idea space, when I talk to every founder, I say that, your vision should be big, but your mission should be deep, right?
Wow.
So I think that's something to really reflect on when you start the business, or even you're freelancing, even if you're thinking about like a specific niche. Do you have those two together to propel you during really testy times, right? Because, or else just being an employee is not a bad thing, right? But then at the end of the day, like it's not your vision, it's not your mission, it's someone else's, founders, right? So I think that's step one. And then obviously step two is all about, execution of that idea. And to be honest, execution is not about just yourself, but execution is finding the people that you want to do it with and partners, and not be kind of selfish, right? Because I'd rather build a large potential business with 3 or 4 people rather than to build a small business by myself. And that's something is a mental shift for a lot of people. So that's what I advocate to, because, if you want to really build something that lasts, I'm hoping that you do it not just because of you, but because of other people that work with you.
All right. That's really a good point. I mean, your vision must be big and your mission must be deep. And then next would be you need to learn how to execute your ideas, right? Now, moving on, let's because you've had obviously a lot of experiences already in your life, right? You've created multiple companies. You've been through a lot of challenges, right? What other
Yeah.
experiences are you looking to um, get in life, and what drives you?
Yeah, what drives me, and this is something that even my friends and especially my wife is, I've been consistent, right? So even when I kind of proposed to my wife, I said that we're gonna live a crazy life, right? And what does it mean? Like I'm super mission driven, right? Like I went to UP the first couple of years of my college, and I just
Mhm.
remember, and I wrote a blog post about this, that what was that moment in your life that like the mission got reignited. And I decided to go to the States when I was 18 years old for college, but then I got a scolding from our department chair, who is now the undersecretary of the DOST. But the department chair for electrical engineering is one of my main mentors, Rowena Guevara, and she gave me a scolding of like I took someone else's spot, right? I took someone else's spot because my family could have paid for me to go to Ateneo, to La Salle, or even send me abroad. But I chose to go to UP because I know it was the best school, right? For engineering, at least. I'm biased, by the way, for people who are not. But but then I always see it's highly subsidized. That's why it's called Scholar ng Bayan, right? Because
Yeah.
it's supposed to be like you're the scholar of the country, and for most people that's their ticket out of poverty. And I took someone else's spot. And from that point on, I realized, and that kind of became my life mission, right? Like, if I took someone else's spot, how can I create millions of other spots, hundreds of millions of other spots, right? For people who can't necessarily afford to get the next opportunity, which I had, right? Like, I had a chance to go to the States. I mean, I got all these different opportunities. I ended up coming back to the Philippines. And that's kind of what my goal is, right? Is that by the time I die, maybe I can make the Philippines a first world country, right? Through technology. And that's kind of what I know, right? So people can do it via arts, people can do it via, writing or whatnot. But I know technology. I love technology, and I think that's a huge propeller towards making the country much more progressive at some point, right? And again, this is my own personal vision. For some other people, it might not be this big, right? Like to be honest, it's not normal to think like me, right? Like I think of how to solve a problem for 100 million people, right? How can I help the Philippines? But if you want to help your community, if you want to help a certain niche of the market, that's also fine if you're passionate about that. I'm just particularly passionate because I just want at some point in my life that my kids for sure say that they're Filipino, not just because they're forced to say they're Filipino, but because the Philippines has a special spot in the economic kind of value chain of the world. And I think we can do that. I mean, we have, I think we can do that in like 20, 30 years if we want to do that. And I think technology is an accelerator. So that's like my passion. That what drives me is maybe in my lifetime I can make a little bit of a dent there. And I wrote the post the other day, which is, maybe my life goal is to be the chief innovation officer of the Philippines before I die, and maybe that could happen someday.
Awesome. That's really a good vision because, a lot of people, um, as you said, are starting businesses, but they don't have a vision that's um, big enough to sustain them during hard times. Right? And they don't have a mission deep enough to propel them forwards during challenges, right? And I'm really curious about this. What challenges have you experienced in your life? I mean, what are the biggest ones, and what did you learn from it, and how did you move past it?
Yeah, and I mean, I can see that kind of multiple times, right? So, and again, that's the problem, I guess, if you're always taking risks. So my philosophy is if you're not challenged, you're not taking risks, and that's kind of hard, right? So I mean, even directly, right? Like, even my academic sense, right? Like, I was, when I was in UP, like I failed like a couple of subjects, right? And me being, in my honor section in high school, like that was just like kind of really difficult for me. Um, and then, I was supposed to go abroad, and in the end, like some of the schools that accepted me rejected me, because in my last semester, I got one failing grade. I mean, obviously, I was lucky that there's still one school that kind of, maybe didn't know about that, and they still accepted me. But through adversity and kind of making sure that doesn't happen again, then I graduated top of my class and as an undergrad in the US, right? So I think that's something to think about, right? Like, how do you make sure that some of these could be negative moments really propel you? And then another advice I have is in negative moments, like just surround yourself with people that care about you, because these are the people that will propel you to move forward, right? Um, other kind of missed opportunities, for example, is I really wanted to scale like my idea space beyond the Philippines into multiple countries in Southeast Asia. But then the difference there is that I also ran out of time, and I ran out of bandwidth, right? Like I was in the Philippines for about 4 years before I left back to the US. But would it be different if I kind of stayed there and scaled it to different countries? Maybe, right? So that's also a path if you want to go towards the entrepreneurial route, right? Like
Mhm.
failure might not necessarily just be like going to zero, but failure maybe is missing our opportunity. Because imagine if I could have made Idea Space not just the Philippines' first accelerator, but the first accelerator for all emerging Southeast Asia, right? And that's something that I, until now, didn't really anticipate, right? So that's kind of my fault of not scaling that as well. So yeah, there's just a lot of different areas that you have to think about, and being down and out and not knowing where to go. I think my only advice is, as long as again the vision of why you're doing it is clear, there's no regrets, right? Like why you're doing it, it's because you want to do something that's bigger than yourself. Then you don't think about wasting time, but it's just part of a larger journey. And then, again, as I said, like if you surround yourself with just people that care about you and understand your mission, then things are always all right, right? So maybe that's my pro tip, right? Like once you're literally in the dumpsters, do not be around negative people, or else you'll just become more depressed, right? Um,
Okay. I mean, that's really a good thing because, a lot of people might be experiencing failure right now or might be discouraged in chasing their dreams, right? So that's really a good message for them. Now, in connection with that, um, let's say now we're going to the meat and potatoes of our interview. Okay.
yeah, I know. This is like where it gets juicy, right?
Yep. This is the hottest question ever. So, let's say hypothetically that you start from scratch. I mean, you suddenly lose everything: your money, your network, what else? Your businesses, everything, and the only thing that remains is your skill of turning ideas into companies, into businesses, right? What are your next 3 steps that you're going to do to regain everything?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, like this scenario could happen to everyone, right? Like, and I've seen this kind of before, right? Like where people could come out of nothing and they've done something, but I think there's 3 areas that I would encourage people to reflect on, and even I will reflect on, right? Like number one is what makes you you, right? Like what's uniquely you. What is this? And not to be like spiritual or anything, right? Like what why did God make you in the world, right? Like what is that part of it? And then what is your unique skill set, unique background, unique mindsets that will then at least have a foundation for you and what you want to do next, right? Because that's something that people are worried about all the time is where do I fit in, especially when hard times come. But what I call is the education of life is with you, right? And my dad always says, all riches can be taken from you, but your education can never be taken from you because that's inside of you already. That's something to think about as like step one. I think step two is all about like people, right? Because again, especially during the times that you're just down and out,
Mhm.
it's the people that you surround yourself is the one that will propel you upward. So maybe a practical advice, even now, right, is to form just real relationships with people, because all of you guys, all of us, right, will become both, in ups and downs, right? Like if I think about it as like, the stock market or even just life, like there's never going to be a time where you're always up. You'll always have a down part, but it's the people who care about you is what kind of, for me, is the one that mitigates the time that you're like in your low points, right? And reminds you of your worth, reminds me of your mission, reminds you of where you should be going. And that just helps you, right? And at least crystallizes where you should be focusing on and cheering you on during these hard times, right? So I think that's the thing, is to cultivate these relationships, not in the low times, but actually in the high times, so that once you go low, you already form that bond together. And also be there also for people, right? Like, that's something that I personally try to like be conscious about, is how do I be there when people need me,
Mhm.
right? If it's just a ping on Facebook or whatnot, like I think that's very important. So relationship is what life is. And to be honest with you, that's something I've learned over time in business and entrepreneurship. It's all about relationships. You do business with people you trust, and trust is about relationships, not in the good times, but in the bad times. And then I think for my last thought kind of here, right, is um mindset, right? And that's why I'm actually writing a book specific on startup mindsets. It's because what will defeat you when you're down and out is yourself, right? Because you have the skills,
Mm-hmm.
you have the network. It's not about you, right? And again, this is not about just starting a company, but even in career, right? Imagine if you lost your job or you got demoted or whatnot, right? Or some opportunity to work out. Your mindset is the one that will make you recover from those parts to then execute on the plan, right? So that's what I would do, which is how do I then remind myself that this is who I am because it's my uniquely who my skill set. I have the people that can help me.
Mm-hmm.
There's no choice but to try, right? And I think that's the thing, right? Like just mentally, how do you become in that state to start executing? Because most people will be paralyzed and get frustrated and depressed, and maybe go to the downward spiral. So you have to control your mind to think that you could recover from some of these areas. So for me, that's a big thing, is to make sure that you're there, you're ready, and you're basically going to execute based on what you think you can achieve, right?
All right. So step one would be about understanding who you really are and what value can you bring to the table, right? Step two would be to know and find people who would help you and you who you can help. It's basically about building relationships with people who you can trust in times of up and times of down, right? And step three would be about mindset, believing that you can get it back again and go back to where you were, right?
Yeah, and executing on it, right? And executing on it, because that's the biggest thing, right? Like you then have the foundation, you then have the network, then you have to have the mindset that you can execute on those, based on those two things, right? And it's going to be hard, but I think you just have to run through it, right?
All right. I just need to clarify because do you have any like some tips for us to for us to know who we are and understand the values and the skills that we could bring to the table? Like, what process can we undergo?
Yeah, and that's actually something that I've been kind of reflecting on for really a long time, right? Like, like what's even me, what makes me unique.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think there's three components to what makes you unique, right? Like one component is like your own personal, like how you were brought up,
All right.
right? Where you were at, your culture, your family culture, your values, etc. Like that's kind of one part, because not everybody has that, right? Like for example, as I grew up like as a Filipino, and being empathetic and thinking of someone else before you is like just inherently, like, I don't know, the culture that I grew up in, right? And some cultures, they don't care about other people,
Yeah.
but I'm like, no, that's who I am. So that whole, like, how you were brought up and where you were brought up is very, very important. The other part is what, based on your education and experience and skill sets, what is unique, right? What is just that collection? Because to be honest, no, I haven't met a single person has exact same career as a different person,
Okay.
right? I haven't met anybody. Like for example, like I went to electrical engineering. I was an aerospace engineer. I went to business school. Then I went to the Philippines. I did like technology. I went to like investments. All these things. So that collection of experiences is what makes what I call is the hard skill sets,
Okay.
right? That's like that one part. So like where you were brought up and what your culture, what your values are, takes one. What your hard skills are based on your unique experiences is like the last one. And I think the last bucket is really this notion of like what really matters to you, right? What is like really, really uniquely something that you will, spend your life in. And for some people, for example, they will die for, seeing their idol, whatever, right? Like, or they'll like die for like travel, right? Or there's some like things that you would. So the way you gauge that is, will you work for something even if no one paid you, right? And typically that's a good gauge of like what really matters to you, because if you still continue to do something, even if, for example, you lose your job but you still continue doing it, that's a good gauge, right? Because that's really what matters to you, within you. So if you look at the three intersections, you're probably the only one in the world that can answer these questions very uniquely. So that's what I would really kind of anchor on, um, because and again, I didn't believe this before, but as I reflect on this, like, some people, that's why, for example, in job interviews or starting companies or investors, sometimes you're just not the right fit,
Mhm.
right? And people take it personal. I prepared for this interview, I prepared for this investor pitch, I prepared for like running this business as client. And for me, in the end of the day, like, I think now is like, it's just not, they just didn't like who I am, right? There's some things I can tweak, whatever, right? But then if you present yourself with these three things up front, the right people that want you there in their same room as them will come out of the woodwork, right?
All right. So let me just recap that. Again, if you're reflecting on this, you need to reflect on three buckets, like your what happened when you were still being nurtured. You need to consider your culture, your values, etc. And then next would be the collection of your experiences, your education, and your skills, which would be considered as hard skills, right? And
Yeah.
then the third one is what really matters to you. When you combine all this, um, at the intersection of these three, you're going to find your calling, if I'm not mistaken, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, it could be calling, or it's just like what makes you unique,
yep.
right? Like, it's funny, and it's even so unique that you're probably the only one in 7 billion people in the world that had exact three circles, right? It's kind of interesting.
That's actually, yeah, interesting. So yeah, if you're reflecting on this, that's the three things that you need to kind of reflect on, so that you would know what is uniquely you, right? And now, down to the last question, Earl. Um, what do you want to contribute to the world? And somehow you've touched on this um, earlier, di ba? What are you looking to contribute to the world, and how are you planning on achieving it?
Yeah, and again, I touched on that, and I'm super consistent. So even in a couple of my blogs, like, I wrote about my essay. I republished my essay that got me into Stanford. And it's funny because that I wrote that when I was 24.
Mhm.
And some of the unique elements are the same exact elements as what I say even now that I'm in my mid 30s, right? And it's all the same, right? Like, how do I just help, you know, the Philippines achieve its potential by being a first world country before I die, right? And now I can even expand that, right? Like, imagine if every person in the world that has a unique idea should be given the opportunity to progress themselves based on their own idea, right? And that's not uniquely Filipino, but then imagine if someone from Africa or Indonesia or Myanmar or South America, right? Like, my theory is that the world now doesn't progress so much because opportunities are hyper concentrated to people who already have power and money. But I think because of technology, because of intellectual property, because of innovation, because of the internet, people can define their destiny more than ever before in history. And I think that type of mindset and news and opportunity should be given to the rest of the world. because this is something that what I call is the OG, the old guard. They're not experts on, but like this generation and the people who are most likely in this online summit, there's unique opportunity to then flank the old guard and become this new generation of thinking, that the glass is half full,
Mhm.
and that theory of abundance, right? Like all of us can build something, and I think that's I think the challenge that I want to give really to this, to this generation, right? Like, and that's kind of what I dedicate my life on, is how do I just maximize opportunities for people, and hopefully by doing that at the macro level, that will help the Philippines at some point become also a first world country, not because of random things, but really because of the power of the ideas of innovation, of technology, that our country can find its unique position in the world, right? So that's kind of what I am. And that's why I have this now maybe new peg of like, if I can become like the chief innovation officer of our country someday. And they're funny because there's no such thing,
Yeah.
right? But if that I can be like that someday, everything just progresses towards that, right? Like if that's why I created the Space QBO. I'm creating this incubator for AI and data startups, which is called Cognity Labs. Why I'm creating a number of platforms, and then maybe I'm also creating this starting this book, Startup Mindsets, which then uniquely positions not just entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley, but entrepreneurs from the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and other parts of the world that's not necessarily just Silicon Valley centric. And then maybe creating kind of my own unique version of, what is the new education university, right? Like, and maybe this is part of it. This is part of like what I'm interested in, which is, how do we learn from each other and get best practices, not from the traditional sense,
Yeah.
but then from a unique sense. So all of these things are happening, and people are like, Earl, like you're doing so many things, but when you decode that, it's all for one mission, right? And I think that's what I want to do, and I think I'm kind of a crazy guy because I think I'm gonna dedicate kind of my life towards this mission. I told my wife that if there's like a mistress, this would be it, right? Which is my mission towards progress and mission towards the country is only is second to like my priority to my wife and my kids, but after that this would be it. This is like my clear number two, diba?
All right.
So that's like my thought process here.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing with us your story, Earl, and the things that are going on in your mind and the things that you have learned on your journey from starting up until now that you have a lot of experience in helping companies grow. How can we follow you?
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter is at Earl Valencia. LinkedIn, I'm pretty active in LinkedIn. I have my blog there. It's also like LinkedIn, Earl Valencia, which is straight. My Instagram is Earl Martin, because Martin is my second name, Earl Martin Valencia. And then I have my podcast as well, Digital Mindsets.
Mhm.
So I think that, and then obviously think about the book someday. And I'll probably gonna create a couple of like kind of personal kind of development kind of courses, maybe some master classes. So if you guys are interested in being part of my master classes, at some point, please DM me and see if there's a community we can form together. I'm very keen on kind of building that as a kind of a community that we can kind of grow from each other as well, right? And maybe create a course out of that. So that's my goal as well.
All right. Thank you again, Earl, for spending the time with us and sharing with us your stories, skills, and experiences. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.